Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So it is 5:24 p.m. on a Wednesday, hump day. Gotta get over the hump. Hope everyone is doing okay today. Today was a pretty decent day. A bit of my day was interrupted by work that needed to be done. But nevertheless, I'm back. I'm here. It's 5 o'clock. Let's shake. Let's make sure my channel is up and running first before getting too far into anything. All right, guys, and by the way, I do videos all the time. I mean, it could be 2 in the morning. I can't sleep. I get up and do a video. It's just whenever the inclination strikes me often. So please hit the bell and please subscribe if you like the content, if you enjoy it. If you find yourself frequenting this channel, you were reluctant, but you find yourself nevertheless inexorably coming back to me, then subscribe. Just get over to subscribe. Look, before I start, I want to thank everyone who helps the show. Honestly, man. And what I mean by everyone, I mean, Jeff Kuntz sending me information, HB sending me information. And I don't mean Harbass, it's another HB who sends the info. People who tweet stuff to me, people who share my videos, like my videos, all those things. You guys are immensely appreciated. You help the show. When I say you can't have a show without it, it is being flat fact true. I can't have a show without it. So all of those people who help through donations, all of those people who help in any way, you help the show. Thank you very much. I often make the case, even if you gave me the benefit of the doubt, thank you. Like, you may disagree with me at the end of the whatever I'm saying. If you're not necessarily just nitpicking and you're like, okay, for what he's trying to get at, I either agree or disagree with him, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do. Because I get some right-wingers. Because honestly, people don't necessarily know how to take... I guess we don't fit into a left-right paradigm in the typical way the left-right paradigm is. From the standpoint of these guys who just fight from the standpoint of whatever their party believes in as much as fighting, this kind of idea on principle. Being against corruption, wanting people to have access to the things they need, everything else. Those things are not necessarily party-based. Those things are value-based, and that is somewhat of a difference in the way you go about your affairs. So that is something that's uncommon in our political spectrum. So thank all of you very much for helping the show putter about. I want to jump across the pond. I watched PMQs this morning, and I was blown away by how much I did not know about what the fuck was going on in Britain. What I mean by that is, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is fascinating. And I come away with it with a particular perspective. Now, what I mean by that is, not knowing exactly what they're talking about, you get the impression of what they're talking about. And when you come away from it, you're like, okay, I need to look this up to figure out exactly a little bit more for this. And so I know what it puts you in mind of. It's like being a movie. If you ever watch a movie and you're watching it from the perspective of somebody who's joining something, let's say it's like The Craft or some kind of witch movie, and the person is just getting their powers, well, you're always from the perspective of the person who's entering this world, not somebody who's already in this world. And they do that because they want to give you this new perspective and have your opinion evolve over time in the same way that the characters evolves over time. Well, I watched PMQs, and then I had to go back and look this up. And I was fascinated by it. There is a generation of people. Theresa May has started to enact immigration policies. In enacting those immigration policies, she's turned people who work like realtors or homeowners, or people who rent properties, and people who own businesses into border guards, making these people look for like paperwork and documents and literature and everything else. The problem with this is the Windrush generation doesn't necessarily have that stuff. And so people are trying to rent property and they're like, you're not a British citizen. Well, here's my information. Yeah, you're not a British citizen. Or even the disincentive of people renting for people who may not be a British citizen. That guy has a little bit of color on him. That guy is a little dicey. I don't know. Now, the British government will say, hey, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to do that for everybody, including people who look like they're British. But let's be honest. Human beings, and the way that human beings act, they would prefer not to get into the legality of issues. Meaning, there will be a disincentive for them to rent to anybody who may even fit the mold of somebody where they could be prosecuted for. You've created a disincentive for renting stuff to certain people or employing certain people. Now, Theresa May gets hit with this at PMQs and is unrepentant. Yeah, she apologizes for the British citizens that got caught up into this. But she completely misses the point, or at the very least bypasses the point, that it's your policies to create that quote-unquote hostile environment that you're talking about that did this. You have a large number of people who were... I was blown away by this. At the end of the PMQ, Jeremy Corbyn said something that I've never heard him say, that he said with a thunderous gravity about it, that I like. He told her to resign. Resign! Think about that. This is the guy, understand what I'm saying. This is Jeremy Corbyn, when he first started this, was the guy who looked like he was completely out of place. The guy who seemed to be disheveled, who seemed to be getting picked apart. Even when he was necessarily right on the issue, he wasn't necessarily doing all that well. I watched these old PMQs. And now he's strutting to the point where they completely delegitimized Jeremy Corbyn as a candidate, meaning he shouldn't even be in that spot. I can't even believe he's in that spot. He would never become leader of the opposition. And then they say he would never become prime minister. And right here in this spot, in that moment, that same guy who they said would never be in the spot that he's in is telling the prime minister to resign because she was so incompetent and failed to such a degree with regards to all of these people, the misery that these people are dealing with. I want to show this, but first I'm going to give a little bit more information on the Windrush thing, because otherwise nobody is going to know what that is. Balthazar, your UFO guests are out of this world, but they seem much more plausible than the neoliberal garbage bought by May, establishment Democrats on Wall Street. I love that. I love that. Thank you, Balthazar. And I love it. I love it. I absolutely love the puns. All right. Let's see. So the New York Times actually did a pretty decent job on this. I've dived through so much literature trying to understand this. So before I show the PMQ, I'm going to give a primer on what's taking place. All right, so right here. Let's start right here. Wait a minute. Yeah, I'm going to use the New York Times. All right. Come on. Get out the way. These browsers are conspiring to... All right, here we are. British citizens one day, illegal immigrant the next. Renford McIntyre was just a child when he left Jamaica to join his parents in Britain. He spent the next 50 years here, working various jobs and paying taxes. Like tens of thousands of people from families encouraged to come to British colonies in the Caribbean to help rebuild post-war Britain, he always assumed that he was a full-fledged British citizen. And understand, for all intents and purposes, they are. I was fascinated by the story because it put me in the mind of DACA recipients. Like, I say that we are Britain's darker brother, and I say that for reasons like this. Like, in the same way the DACA thing came up in Britain, in the United States, you have this other oddity in Britain with immigrants, people who came here legally, and all of a sudden, their citizenship is thrown into question. It's slightly different than DACA, but it's still within the same vein or within that same spirit of people who were brought here either through no fault of their own, or in this case, the British government saying, yes, come here, help us rebuild. In the United States case, they are brought here technically illegally, but through no fault of their own. In Britain's case, they actually came here at the behest of the British government. Let's keep going. Until, that is, the government decided he wasn't. At the age of 60, he was declared an illegal immigrant. He lost his job. He could no longer apply for benefits. He became homeless. I've lost out on everything, Mr. McIntyre, who is now 64. The issue has simmered in Britain since May. The Home Secretary set out to create a quote-unquote really hostile environment for illegal immigrants, imposing tough new requirements in 2012 for people to prove their legal status. But that was not easy for thousands of people like McIntyre, many of whom did not have British documentation and whose parents came to Britain before the Caribbean colonies gained independence. Just this month, as leader of the former British colonies gathered in London for a Commonwealth meeting, Mrs. May, now Prime Minister, found herself forced to apologize for the harsh treatment many Caribbean immigrants were experiencing and pledged to grant citizenship to all of those caught up in the bureaucratic tangle. "We're genuinely sorry," she said. Friction within the Commonwealth was not what Mrs. May needed. Britain is already at odds with its neighbors, and leaders struggle to difficult negotiations over to leaving the European Union. Great strides have been made to improve race relations in Britain. The engagement last year of Prince Henry VI in line to the throne to Meghan Markle, a biracial American actress, was seen as many as a watershed. Right here. Mr. McIntyre's parents were among thousands of colonial subjects invited to come to Britain to help rebuild the nation's shattered War II. They were part of the Windrush generation, named for the passenger liner that carried many of them to Britain. Because Jamaica had yet to gain independence when his parents switched to islands, their passports said citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies. Mr. McIntyre's descent after the British changed their rules was quick. When he applied for housing aid, officials refused him, even though he provided school records and reams of tax returns showing that he had lived and worked in Britain all his adult life. "They said I'm not a British subject," he said. "I was confused. They put me through a tough time ever since I rely on alcohol to numb the pain." Think about that. You'd live and work in a place for years, and then all of a sudden, gone. Not so much. You're no longer a British citizen. Overnight. Let's see. I'm seeing weirdness with my connection. Come on. Guys, I'm seeing strange oddities with the connection itself. So let's see if it comes back on. What's going on? Sets us up. There we are. All right, back on. I'm sorry. It looks like I was having an issue with the connection itself. All right, so I am going to go from this because I think this is correct. And right here, this other part. Thousands of people who came over from Britain between 1948 and 1971 from the Caribbean are thought to be in the same predicament as Mr. McIntyre. Estimates of the number of people affected vary from 50,000 to 500,000. Some have been detained. At least one man was denied cancer treatment because he could not prove to the doctors he was in the country legally. The Prime Minister May, at first, tried to place the blame on the Labour Party, but she was forced to back down in the face of evidence that the groundwork for the scandal was laid during the years that she was the Home Secretary of the Cabinet Minister responsible for overseeing immigration. I remember this. Jeremy Corbyn raised this issue in one of the Prime Minister's PMQs. I think it was the last PMQ before last. Theresa May says, "No, this took place in a Labour government," in this way of thinking that she was stinging him, in which case Jeremy Corbyn pushed back. "No, you were the Home Secretary. This took place under you." Now, they're making the point that she tried to place the blame and was forced to back down on that claim. And eventually, I'm sorry, our bad. I know I said this in PMQs in the big live debate and everything else. And I know I just mistakenly said that in PMQs where everybody can see me say it. But now I'm backing down silently. I back down silently. So now that I've gone through this, let's take a look at the PMQs. Because, like I said, I was fascinated by the PMQs on this. Because she got the stuffing beat out of her. Jeremy Corbyn is coming into his own on this like nobody's business. And issues like this where he's the most sincere on. 50 to 500,000 people were affected on her watch. Her trying to make this more somewhat of a hostile work environment for the people who are living in that country. Those people were Brits. And you treated those people as if they were some kind of illegal aliens or if they were in that country illegally. They were in that country. They've worked in that country. They paid taxes in that country their entire lives. So now you've pulled the rug from under them with these policies that you've enacted. Let's take a look at PMQs. I think she gets rebuked here. But she is still, at the end of this, unrepentant. And at the end of this, Jeremy Corbyn screams, "Resign! Resign!" Let's let him
Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the birth of their baby, and I wish them well. I think we should also reflect that Doreen and Neville Lawrence fought for years to get justice for the death of their son. The Macpherson inquiry showed that institutional racism was a major factor in the inquiry. We need to drive out institutional racism in all its forms, wherever it raises its head within our society. Mr. Speaker, we recognise that the Home Secretary has rightly apologised to the Windrush generation and made a commitment to compensate people for the hardship they've endured. The government is committed to compensation in theory, but as yet nothing in practice. There's an understandable lack of trust by the Windrush generation. So can the Prime Minister today be clear and confirm that those British citizens who've worked, paid taxes here for decades, wrongly denied pensions and benefits will be fully compensated?
Can I first of all say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, it is absolutely right that across this House we should all be absolutely clear in our determination to ensure that we stamp out racism in every form. Let me set out the House the action that has been taken, because my right honourable friend did make very clear the offering the other day in her statement before the House that those who came here before the 1st of January 73 from Commonwealth countries, this is from Commonwealth countries as a whole, will be offered citizenship status without paying the fee, without taking the knowledge of language and life in the UK test, and the children of that generation, the Windrush generation who are in the UK, will in most cases be British citizens already, but they will also be, where that's not the case, they'll be able to apply to naturalise at no further cost. We're also taking action in relation to those who made their life here but retired to their country of origin and have found it difficult or impossible to return to the UK, and will work with High Commissions to make sure they can easily access the offer of formal British citizenship, because the Windrush generation are British. They are part of us. And there will be a compensation scheme, which my right honourable friend will set the details of that compensation scheme out in due course. But I think everybody will see that the action the government has taken is because we know these Windrush generation, the Labour front bench shake their heads and go, oh no. The Windrush generation are British, they are part of us, and we will ensure that.
One of the things that I continually find when I watch these, she's always trying to explain some fuck up or foible or failure that her government has presided over. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, at one point, it wasn't enough cops, so people were being stabbed because it's a conservative government. Like conservatives, they like to cut in order to make sure their other cronies can get more. And in this case, it was mass stabbings. It's like, why are there mass stabbings in Britain? They were talking about people being scared of going out in the daytime in London because of this. Tory government, let's cut some taxes. What was the other issue? The NHS not having enough NHS or staff, not having enough resources going to the NHS staff. So you had people dying in ambulances or ambulances lined up out of hospitals because they didn't have enough staff to deal with the ambulances. It's one failure after the next. This is the woman who you guys have decided is going to go into Brexit with. She is presiding over a record of failure. I swear, it's one drama after the next with this government. Let's keep going. And I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that. I mean, think back to all of the things that have come up. And all of those things have really boiled down to there are not enough resources going to XYZ. Even the Grindle fire. Even that. When the research came out recently saying that the materials that they were using for it essentially didn't live up to snuff. Fund your services, man. Those services will save your life. The Tory government does not believe in funding these things, just like the Conservatives and the Democrats in this country. Protect your services. Let's keep going. Let's hear Jeremy's response.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, it's not an act of generosity to waive citizenship fees when they're British citizens already, and they should be granted full status immediately. Mr. Speaker, 4 years ago, an internal Home Office memo stated that her hostile environment policies could make it harder for people like the Windrush generation to find homes and, in its own words, provoke discrimination. Why did the Home Secretary ignore that memo?
And I looked up essentially what the British policy was for this. Let's see if I have this up. Right here. Some of the policies that Theresa May enacted. You have to check. You must check that the tenant or lodger can legally rent your residential property in England. Before the start of the new tenancy, you must check all tenants are 18 or older. Oh, that's nice. Even if they're not named on the tenant's agreement, there's no tenancy agreement. The tenancy agreement isn't in writing. The tenant is only allowed to stay in the UK if for a limited time. If you need to check the 28 days before the start of the tenancy. And then there's this. Check all new tenants. It is against the law to only check the people you think aren't British citizens. I understand that, but let's be honest. You're a renter. You don't want to really deal with the legalities of stuff. You just want to rent your property to somebody. Are you going to be more inclined to rent it to somebody who's of a particular disposition or to a particular color, meaning this person is British. I can tell this person is British. I know this person is British. I'm renting it to this person. As opposed to the other guy who may be British. Maybe. One is simpler. You've incentivized racism to some degree. That's the point that the people are getting at. Your policies have incentivized people to be somewhat racist. You don't need to check tenants in these type of accommodations. You don't need to check tenants if they live in accommodations, etc., etc. But this essentially ended up turning people into cops or turning landlords into cops. In fact, I think the New York Times piece delves into, right here, Independent. It gets into the number of people who were being turned away when they were doing studies, and they were found right here. And research found that 42% of landlords were unlikely to rent to someone without a British passport, with a quarter less likely to rent to people who appear foreign. It's causing a lot of damage by encouraging discrimination and letting market against ethnic minorities or people from other nations. Chai Patel, the JCWI's legal director, told The Independent. And again, that the document that I showed is not a good case of that. It doesn't fully get into the laws of what these people have to do. But landlords essentially have to make sure that the person they're renting to doesn't necessarily run afoul of Theresa May's policies. Her immigration policies are incentivizing people to be racist. And this is not just racist from the standpoint of I hate immigrants. It's from the standpoint of I don't want to deal with the legalities of the stuff. I just want to rent my property. Study itself, 42%. Let's keep going. I want to give a little clarity to what they're saying, because if you're an American audience, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's keep going. Where's my... There we are.
The right honourable gentleman talks about a hostile environment. What we are proposing here will, I think, flush illegal migrants out. We are trying to create a much more hostile environment in this country if you are here illegally. Those are not my words. They are the words of the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham Hodge Hill when he was Labour Immigration Minister. And the Labour leader ought to know about this because the Right Honourable Gentleman sits on his front bench.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Speaker, what I'm talking about is the Windrush generation of people who came here completely legally. The Prime Minister herself was warned by my friend, the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, who's now the Shadow Home Secretary, directly about these policies in 2014. And when that Act was going through Parliament, the then Community Secretary, Eric Pickles, wrote to her warning the costs and risks considerably outweigh the benefits. Why did she ignore his advice as well as the request from my honourable friend?
Right Honourable Gentleman, in relation to the Windrush generation, we have made absolutely clear that the Windrush generation, those people who came here from the Commonwealth before the 1st of January 1973, have a right to be here. They are British. They are part of.
This is I can't tell if she's missing the point on purpose or intentionally. The point that Jeremy Corbyn is making is your immigration policies has allowed people who are British citizens to be caught up in this kind of dragnet. This is your policies. It's not an act of God. It's your policies. And her argument is, yes, we understand they're British citizens. No, I can't tell if she's doing this intentionally, but it's somewhat aggravating. They're making two different points. Jeremy Corbyn, your immigration policies are the issue. Her point is, yeah, but those people are Brits and that was just a mistake. No, it's your labor policy. It's your policies. It's your policies. His point. It's your immigration policies. Let's keep going.
The problem at the time was that they were not documented with that right, and that is what we are now putting right. He talks about action that the government has taken in relation to those who are here illegally. The Windrush generation are here legally. Action against those who are here illegally has been taken by successive governments. Checks on someone's right to work here came in 1997. Measures on access to benefits in 1999. Civil penalties for employing illegal migrants in 2008, both under a Labour government. And why have these actions been taken? Because people up and down this country want to ensure that the government is taking action on those people who are here illegally. It is not fair to those people who work hard, who have a right to be here, who've contributed to this country, if they see people who are here illegally being given the same access to rights and services.
All right, I see what's going on. They're having an indirect conversation, but they're talking about the same thing. But they're talking about it in weird, indirect ways. But they're talking about it in more... I know this sounds weird, but this is more of an honest conversation that takes place in the United States, even though it's not exactly quite an honest conversation. Jeremy Corbyn is essentially saying, look, your policies on immigration has caused all of these people to get caught up in this kind of dragnet. You're incompetent. These are your policies. This wasn't taking place before you enacted these particular policies. This is your fault. Now, in her case, she's saying, look, the people of Britain want stringent, we have immigration laws, and we need to enact those immigration laws. The problem with this is all of this issue associated with the Windrush generation didn't take place until the conservative governments started enacting these immigration laws. Like, so yeah, there may have been some kind of requirements on the people who are working at a particular place. We have those requirements in the United States. You're not supposed to hire somebody who's an illegal citizen. Why did it change under her government, or at the very least under Tory control? Like, that's what he's getting at. He's getting at this point of, this changed based on the things that you yourself did when you took office. Not something that took place beforehand. Her stressing that, hey, governments in the past have putting laws in place around certain requirements. Yes, but it wasn't falling apart before you got here, or at the very least before the Tory government got in control. Let's take a look. I'm sorry, it looks like my feed is going in and out. I'm not quite sure why. I'm hoping it stabilizes. But what I'll do is I'll put up this video afterwards, and it'll be the essentially copy with all of the lags and everything else. But for the live audience, I apologize for the lagging. Let's keep going.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to want to get away from the injustice done to the Windrush generation. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission warned about the 2016 Immigration Act, saying the bill is likely to lead to destitution and may cause inhuman and degrading treatment in breach of Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights. They've quite rightly apologised for the scandalous way in which British citizens have been treated, but it was due to the 2014 and 16 Immigration Acts. So will the Prime Minister now commit to reviewing that legislation to make sure this never happens again?
As I set out for the House last week.
again, I don't want to keep interjecting, but I feel the need to place the argument because it doesn't feel like, they're not directly hitting the argument. And I guess maybe in an odd way they are. They're talking about her legislation. At least that's what Jeremy Corbyn is talking about. He's saying your legislation has done harm to 50 to 500,000 people who are in this country who are British citizens who came here legally. That's you. Your policy, your legislation did that. That's something that you did, despite all of these people telling you that this is problematic. You did it anyway. You didn't care. Not to mention, as I showed you, she was doing it without oversight, meaning like they weren't going back and addressing the flaws of the bill, the defects of the bill. They just kind of let it ride, despite people telling them, look, this is kind of problematic and this is going to have cause traumatic issues for the people in your country. She did it anyway. She did it anyway. Theresa May's response to this, or her retort to this, is, yes, we agree that the Windrushs are legal citizens. That's not really a response to what they're saying. He's calling you incompetent. That's what he's calling you. Your response is, yes, we agree that they're legal citizens of Britain. Yes, he also agrees that they're legal citizens of Britain. Then why did you pass legislation that deprived those people of what you would consider to be legal rights in Britain? That's what he is getting at, and that's what you are ducking and dodging and trying to not deal with at all. Let's keep going. Let's see. She's probably going to repeat some nonsense of, yes, we agree that these are legal citizens of Britain. She's dodging the point. Let's keep going.
This is a generation who came here prior to 1973. Well, the Labour front bench say we know this, but the questions that the right honourable gentleman is asking suggest that they're ignoring some of the facts in relation to this. This is a generation who came here prior to 1973. We are not ignoring the problems that some members of this generation are facing. That is why my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has set out a special team in the Home Office to deal with their inquiries, not just deal with their inquiries, but actively help them to find the documentation to clarify their status. That is why we have made the offer that my right honourable friend made of ensuring we can give them formal British citizenship, which recognises that they are British, but does so in a formal, documented way. The problem was that back prior to 1973, when the Windrush generation came here, they were not given documents that set out their status. We are now putting that right, and we will leave no stone unturned to put that right.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, in 2013, the then Home Secretary said it was about creating a really hostile environment, and that's why she was introducing the legislation. Had the Windrush generation not mounted the campaign that they have, had members on this side of the House not raised the matter persistently, there would be no compensation, there would be no review, there would be no apology. But, Mr. Speaker, any review of legislation needs to be wider than just immigration law. The dismantling of legal aid provision in 2012 made the impact of the 2014 Immigration Act harder to challenge. These policies swept up British citizens and legal migrants, causing them immense suffering, as she was warned. So can the Prime Minister send a clear message today and tell us the hostile environment is over, and that her bogus immigration targets that have driven this hostile culture will be scrapped? The Windrush generation have served this country and deserve better than this.
The Windrush generation are British. They have contributed to this country. They have made their life here.
She's like a robot. She's repeating the same thing over again. It's like, he's hitting you on incompetence. He's not... Yes, the Windrush generation. Yes, they're British. Everyone agrees. Nobody is disagreeing that they're Brits. Nobody. There's nobody who's disagreeing that these people are Brits. He's arguing that you are incompetent. that you're passing certain legislation that is adversely affecting certain people in your country, even though you were warned that this legislation would do exactly that. That's what he's charging here, not whether or not you acknowledge that they're Brits. We understand that you acknowledge that they're Brits, Theresa May. Thank you very much. He's saying that you're incompetent. That's something different. Let's keep going. You can keep saying it, and I understand. And I understand why she's saying this. She's saying this over and over and over again because she's trying to say, look, we're not going after regular Brits. But nobody believes you're going after regular Brits. Let's keep going. I'm not going to keep repeating it. I think the charge here is incompetence. And yes, Jeremy Corbyn is trying to pull up this thing of, see, I'm fighting for the people in this, and look at what she did with these immigration laws. I understand it. Fair enough. Theresa May is making the point. Look, this is a logistics issue. This is just... These people didn't have documentations. That is the only problem here. There is no other problem here. We're trying to make this right. Yeah, I don't take that. I don't buy that. Fact is, as she made her point earlier, there were people who put in legislation dealing with immigration and dealing with work and everything else. And you didn't have this. You didn't have this. There wasn't this fallout. This came from incompetence. This came from incompetence from a Tory regime. Let's keep going.
Dealing with those people who are here illegally, not the Windrush generation, they are here legally. There are people who are in this country illegally. And I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman again, I've quoted the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham Hodge Hill when he was Labour's Immigration Minister. The Leader of the Opposition referred to 2013. In 2013, the then Shadow Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford, said, we need much stronger action from government to bring illegal immigration down. That is, well, the Labour front bench are saying the Windrush generation are not illegal. They are not illegal. They are here legally. That is why we are providing the support to enable them to get the documents for their status. What we are talking about, what the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, is talking about, is whether or not we should deal with illegal immigration. And up and down this country, the British public will tell him we should deal with illegal immigration.
Wait, she's right, by the way. That part, she's right. That is what he's talking about. Like I said, this is weird because they're talking about their issues indirectly. Yes, he's charging that she's incompetent, but Jeremy Corbyn is also making a point about their immigration laws. Now, so yeah, that's a fair point. She's right. I mean, they're talking about their points in an odd way, but yeah, he's talking about two things. One, you're incompetent for doing this to these people, even though you knew you should not have done this. Or at least taking this particular policy, you were told was going to adversely impact a lot of people, and you took that policy anyway. That's the first point. So that's to some degree incompetence. But the second point is, your immigration laws are the things that cause this to take place. You need to reevaluate those laws. Are you going to reevaluate those laws? He asked her as much as I think in the last question, are you going to reevaluate those laws? The answer, of course, is going to be no, because she's then stressing, this is for illegal immigrants, this is for illegal immigrants, this is for illegal immigrants. We understand that. We understand that. They're talking about this in a really interesting way, somewhat indirectly. They're finally hitting their points, and she is making a good point that what Jeremy Corbyn is talking about is their legal immigration, or is their immigration laws itself. Not necessarily this one specific case, even though he's using this case to highlight the problems with her immigration laws. Let's keep going.
Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the environment created by her as Home Secretary for 6 years when she knew full well of the problems the Windrush generation were facing. At last, she's been forced to act upon it. Last week, the current Home Secretary admitted the Home Office sometimes loses sight of the individual. Yet we now know that when she took over from a predecessor, her intent was to harden this cruel and misdirected policy, pledging to do so ruthlessly. A report last month by immigration officials stated the hostile environment measures were not even having the desired effect. The current Home Secretary inherited a failing policy and made it worse. Isn't it time she took responsibility and resigned?
That is ballsy. I love that. I love that. I love that. Because, again, I keep going back to this thing. What did Jeremy Corbyn look like 4 years ago, 5 years ago? Jeremy Corbyn in no way looked like this, this level of bravado where he's talking about resign as prime minister. That is fucking amazing. Let's hear a response. But there has been a decided difference in who Jeremy Corbyn has become from where he was to where he is now, just in a short time he's been in PMQs, meaning leader of the opposition, and I love it. Let's take a look.
The House must calm itself. We've got a long way to go and a lot of backbenchers' questions to reach. Let's hear the Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that up and down this country, people want to ensure that the government is taking action against those people who are here in this country illegally, because it isn't fair that people who work hard day in and day out, who contribute to this country, who put into the life of this country, are seeing people who are here illegally accessing services in the same way. We are acting to ensure that those people who are here legally are given the support that they need. We welcomed the Windrush generation those many years ago. They are British, they are part of us, and we are ensuring that they remain here and are able to continue to live their lives here. But it is also right that this government takes action against those people who are accessing services despite being here illegally and not putting in and not contributing to this country. And I say to the right honourable gentleman, if he wants to talk about issues of fairness, if he wants to talk about a government that is kind, then let's just look and see what a Labour government would be like. Because a Labour government would wreck our economy, that would damage people's jobs, that would destroy, that would tax people and end up with debt for future generations. It's not a Labour government that is kind or fair to anybody.
Wow, she barely got that out. He beat the stuffing out of her. I think it's like, I'm going to get the last question and you beat the stuffing out of me for 5 minutes, but I'm going to hit you back at the very end. Okay, I'm sorry, that looks bad because you got the stuffing beat out of you for the entire time. He punched this. Like, I guess my point is, if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I thought to myself, wait a minute, what did you do to this particular generation of people? And why are this generation of people being disenfranchised in this way? That guy lost his life. I mean, the McIntyre guy in the New York Times, he lost his life like overnight. You can't stay at this place. You cannot have this job. I understand that there were other people who put in policies before Theresa May got in office. Fair enough. But why is this now just taking effect? Like, that's my point. If she's going to make this point that, yeah, people have put in legislation dealing with immigration before, okay, but why didn't they fuck up to this degree? It's one fuck up after the next. Now, here's the other point. The othering effect. I don't like the othering. Like it's something that takes place in the United States. I would imagine it takes place everywhere. But this thing of we're Brits and they are something else and we need to pay attention to this other because this other is somehow fucking up society. Oftentimes, the people who they're talking about as other are working in that society, working often for less, and is buying goods and services and everything else just like any other human being will buy. Her statement that these people don't give back to the society. I mean, yeah. I don't know how it is in Britain. I would say in America, that is folly. Republicans tend to use this othering thing just to scam people for votes. This creating this thing of us versus them. It seems to be a right-wing trope. It seems to be something that the right wing takes place regardless of where they are. So, oh wow. Let's see. Beltazar 228. If you don't use it, OBS can allow you to create multiple screens where you can computer and face cam can be in one corner. I do use OBS, but I always feel like there's no need for somebody just watching me stare at at the screen. Jamal, thank you for the video coverage of the UK politics. Jeremy Corbyn is fantastic. Cool Blue 71. Jeremy Corbyn is fantastic, and thank you very much. But to be perfectly honest, I don't get the whole need to secure borders and illegal immigration arguments. There are obvious reasons why trying to get into the country, and they are mostly harmless. Agreed. As someone who is a family who came from the UK in that era, I cannot justly convey how disgusted I am by this whole situation. Thanks for covering this, Jamal. I was fascinated by this. I watched PMQs and I thought, okay, first, what are they talking about? What does the Windrush thing mean? What does it mean? And then as I'm looking at it, I'm going through one article after the next, after the next, after the next. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that there may have been legislation before. There's always legislation in whatever country you're in. But clearly, it wasn't a crisis situation as it is now. You didn't have people just kind of losing their livelihood or losing their life in the blink of an eye because Theresa May wanted to have this kind of hardline approach on immigration. Yeah, it's incompetence. I understand what she's saying in the PMQs that, look, it's not my hardline stance that calls. This was just a problem with policy. That's all. I mean, we didn't, put our T's and Q's. That for the most part, this is not an issue with policy. The policy is just fine. There's an issue with the people who fell through the cracks. Jeremy Corbyn is making the point you're minimizing that 50,000 or 500,000 of those people fell through the cracks. That's a really big goddamn crack. You're minimizing the damage to those people's lives. And it never had to take place if you were willing to review your legislation that allowed this tragedy to take place. That's his point. That's his main basic point. Theresa May's main point is, this is just fell through the cracks. It just fell through the cracks. We're trying to rectify that, in which case our policy is just fine. Look, it always depends on where you fall on that argument. You may say, yeah, her policy is just fine, but this was a major fuck up. She's incompetent. Or you can say, well, that policy was problematic in the first place, and this is just more evidence of the fact that the policy was problematic. I don't live in Britain, so I don't fully necessarily know the ins and outs of it. I always say we're Britain's darker brother. And the scamming for votes, using this othering tactic, is something that's also done in the United States. I don't like it here. I don't like it in Britain. So, let's see. And Beltazar, Theresa May claims are like trying to defend Nancy Pelosi taking corporate cash by saying, do you want Republicans to get all the corporate money? Oh, wait. That wasn't Nancy Pelosi, unless Nancy Pelosi said it too. That was, what is his name? What is his name? He did the bill. God damn it, I can't think of his name. He worked on the Finance Committee in the Senate. I cannot think of his name. He's the gay senator. And I don't mean that as a pejorative. I mean, he's gay. He's literally gay. Barney Frank said that. Somebody kind of challenged him saying, it's like, what is with you taking this money? He was like, do you want them to take all the money? It's like, do you want the banks to take all the money? Unless both of them said it, which I wouldn't be shocked in the least. When elected representatives don't have to take citizenship exams, why should immigrants? At the very least, representatives should have to take it. Beltazar 228. Yeah. I don't see the big deal with the citizenship thing. I understand people want to protect their borders and everything else. But fact is, the people who are coming here give more than what they're taking out. That's in the United States. I don't know about the UK, but in the United States, they tend to give more than what they're taking out. It doesn't bother me in the least. Most of them are harmless. Most of them have no issue at all. The issues that I am worried about, the issues that plague me, are things that dealing with major things like legislation stuff. healthcare, education, making sure people have access to the things that they need, making kids a priority in the country. What I mean by that is, if you have a kid, to be able to take care of that kid, and at the very least the government looking at it and say, look, it is a value that you have a kid in this country, so we want to make sure that you have the things that you need, however that is. I think we need a reimagining of our society. Now, this is straying away from my point, so let me come back to this. I'm further to the left and most on that, so fair enough. Jeremy Corbyn is making a few points, but like I said, I've been over before. I found this to be an interesting conversation, to say the least, and it blew me away when I first looked at it. It was like, okay, I need to learn more about what's taking place here. And as I'm learning more about it, I'm like, why did this take place? Like, why did these people lose their livelihood in this way? And Jeremy Corbyn is also right. If he didn't bring this up, if they weren't bashing him over and over and over on this, the government would have never changed their policies. They would have kept those policies exactly the same. And even now, despite all of those people being hurt by it, she's still unrepentant, not wanting to change it. So, truth, Jamal, maybe if we stop ruining other countries with our intervention trade deals, people would need to immigrate to other countries. You know what's wild about that? We attacked Iraq. We blew that country to smithereens. The United States assisted Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia spread terrorism throughout that region of the world, including being somehow instrumental in the attacks on the United States. We've supported the Syrian government or the military going against the Syrian government. That created refugees that streamed into Europe and destabilized the politics of Europe. All of this stuff is related. None of this stuff is independent of one another. There's no way to look at the stuff that's taking place in Europe without taking place in the context of what's taking place in the Middle East to cause what's taking place in Europe. It's fucking fascinating. Marine Le Pen almost got into office on this kind of Trumpian kick using the immigration thing. I mean, it's fascinating, man. It's absolutely fascinating. Jenny Lynn, they certainly never mentioned capitalism as the direct cause of the poverty, exploitation of the third world, and the wars that lead to immigration. Yes, Jenny. Tim Flowball, Chris Foster, no need to ask. It's right there at the end of its neck. I don't know what that one means. Good morning from Vietnam, Jamal. Nicholas Locke. Very cool, Nicholas. Fucking A. My wife and I are talking about going there, traveling there. Don't forget the U.S. flag is derived from the flag of the British East Indian Trade Company. Look it up. Free X. Wouldn't be surprised in the least. Would not be surprised in the least. All right, guys. I'm going to end this. Thank you all for showing. I apologize for the lags that I saw in the video. Usually this was rock solid here. But nevertheless, it came back. So thank you very much. And for everybody who assisted, let's see. Beltazar 228, I love his puns. Cool Blue 71, Nicholas Huron, guys, thank you very much. I really mean it. I'm always shocked to some degree that I'm able to do the show, but you guys make it possible. So thank you very much. You would probably see me on later tonight, knowing me. If something comes up, I'll be there. And I know there's a few stories that I want to do, so I may jump on it from before tomorrow. I try to get in 4 a day. At least 4 a day, and it's like at least 4 days, usually more. Oh wait, there's another one. Beltazar 228. Theresa May said in an interview that the worst thing she's ever did was run through fields of wheat. She's not only a liar and a war criminal, but in full denial. Oh, Jesus Christ. Are you serious? I have to look that up. That's awesome. Theresa May, fields of wheat. Jesus Christ, that is so bizarre. Yeah, that's so bizarre. I mean, I guess if you have the opportunity, fuck it, why not? It's just an odd thing to bring up. All right, yeah, I end it here. If you like the content, please feel free to share, like, and subscribe. And of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone. And have a good night. Maybe you probably see me later. Either way, have a decent night.